Hi, welcome to our channel. I'm here with Annette today and we're doing a comparison between two portrait lenses, the Zeiss Batis 85mm f1.8 on the Sony A7 III and the Fuji 56mm f1.2 on the XT3. Both of these cameras have a similar resolution and the lenses have a similar angle of view and depth of field because of the apertures and the focal length and sensor size. But because of that, I thought it'd be a good comparison to make, especially because we're shooting on two different formats. Generally speaking, APS-C cameras tend to be a lot cheaper, and the perspective is that APS-C cameras don't have the same quality as full frame. So I thought, let's do a comparison, let's test how both of these systems work and see if it is in fact worth spending more for the A7 III and this setup versus the smaller, lighter, cheaper setup with the Fuji XT3. So we're in Lee City Centre. The weather's not too bad today, is it?
Yeah, it's really nice today.
It's a bit bright on my face at the moment, but it's okay. We're not going to be taking pictures of me, fortunately, but Annette's going to be taking pictures of a model that we've got. Her name is Danielle, so I'm going to give her both cameras and let's go take some pictures.
Yeah.
So for this first set of images, Annette was shooting with available light and we were just using the diffusion section of the reflector to control the light. And in this scenario, in real world shooting, we found that the results between both cameras was very similar. The only difference that I found while shooting between the Sony and the Fuji was the fact that the eye detect and the autofocus on the Sony was a lot snappier and a lot more effective. Although the Fuji's eye detect is very good and it might look like it's doing a good job in this scene, it didn't do as well as the Sony. It hunted quite a bit and it kept getting confused with other objects in the scene. Once we put both images side by side in Lightroom, we can start to see what the results are like from both cameras in a more real world shooting environment. And from this distance, both of them look very good. The depth of field is very similar. However, there is one advantage to shooting with an f1.2 aperture on the Fuji, and that is that you can shoot with a much faster shutter speed compared to the f1.8 aperture on the Sony. The other difference you'll notice from this distance is the fact that the colors are slightly different. Both of them have been set to daylight in terms of the white balance. However, the colors are noticeably different. The Sony is leaning a little bit more into the magentas, whereas the Fuji is leaning a little bit more into the yellows. I like them both for different reasons. I really can't decide which one I prefer. I mean, some of you might have a particular preference, but I really like the results from both of these systems. The Sony is a little bit more accurate. However, the Fuji seems to have a little bit more character from my perspective. Zooming in 1:1 and you'll start to see that the Zeiss Batis is noticeably sharper than the Fujifilm, even in more real world shooting scenarios. And this was the sharpest image I could find in terms of the focus. Between the two, the Zeiss is a clear winner when it comes to sharpness. However, I am having to zoom in 1:1 to see those differences, and in all fairness, the difference isn't mind-boggling. They both actually perform at a very high level. Okay, so first impressions, we've just been taking a few pictures of Danielle, and between the two, what I'm finding is ergonomics, the Fuji is actually a little bit better. I mean, the grip on the Sony is much larger, but even still, it's the gap between the grip and the lens which is causing me problems. And maybe it's because my hands are a little bit bigger than yours. Maybe, what do you think?
Yeah, I didn't really find that as an issue. I didn't even notice, to be honest.
Fair enough. Well, the other thing I'm noticing is that the Sony tends to be a little bit snappier, especially when it comes to eye detect. When I'm taking pictures of Danielle, as soon as I hit the eye detect, it just finds focus and nails it every single time. With Fuji, it's been struggling for me. What are your thoughts when it comes to like just finding the frame and subjects and so on?
To me, it was actually quite similar, but I know we're only taking a few shots, so I can't really say just yet. But I think the biggest thing for me was the aperturing. Really, it's just the way it feels.
It's a good feature.
It's just, I'm used to that kind of lens when shooting, and this feels a bit empty and bare to me.
Fair enough. Sony is empty and bare. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to take a few more pictures around these. We're going to do some autofocus tests as well. And then, yeah, so let's carry on. When it comes to focus tracking, the Fuji was actually better at getting more shots in focus. And although we talk about how the Sony felt snappier in the hand and it was a bit faster, the Fuji landed more shots. Bear in mind the conclusion was filmed before we had a chance to go back and have a look at the images, and the conclusion is predominantly based on how we felt whilst we were shooting with the cameras, so I'd take it with a tiny pinch of salt. When it comes to the background blur or the bokeh between both of these lenses, the Fuji, in my opinion, looks quite a bit nicer compared to the Zeiss. The Zeiss just has a little bit of a harsher look in comparison, and the Fuji just looks a little bit softer and a little bit more pleasing. I just feel like it has more character in comparison to the Zeiss. Even though I accidentally slipped the aperture ring to f1.4, even at f1.4 the bokeh balls look a little bit rounder on the edges compared to the Zeiss. The Zeiss has a lot more cat's eye look compared to the Fuji. Even still, although I prefer the look of the Fuji in this regard, more people actually like the images coming from the Sony than they did the Fuji, including the model. So I don't know how much value that has, but I just thought it'd be important to mention that point. And finally, we compare the sharpness between both of these lenses in a more controlled environment, and if we zoom 2 to 1, then you'll notice that the Zeiss is quite clearly better than the Fuji. It's picking up a lot more detail, and as we start moving towards the edges of the frame, you'll notice that the Zeiss retains that detail significantly better than the Fuji. The Fuji smudges quite a lot around the edges of the frame. Even from this distance, you can see that smudging does have a bit of an impact on the overall image, whereas the Zeiss just looks much clearer, has more contrast, and looks better overall. Of course, when it comes to real-world shooting, that edge softness coming from the Fuji actually adds to the character and the overall look, and I did mention earlier on the fact that I actually like that. Right, so we've been shooting with the Sony and the Fuji today, and we've been taking a bunch of pictures of Danielle and just here around Leeds, and one thing is very clear. The Sony is a better camera and a system overall. The image quality from this camera with the Batis lens is just a lot better than the 56mm f1.2 with the Fuji XT3. I mean, I thought the XT3 with the 56 f1.2 would hold up really well, but when we're shooting wide open, and even when you're stopping down a little bit, the Zeiss Batis is just a heck of a lot sharper, so it's picking up a lot more detail. Autofocus, eye detect. I mean, it was just a lot snappier, wasn't it? Like, yeah. What did you think?
Yeah, it was my first time shooting with Sony, and I'm surprised to say it seemed a lot faster in comparison to Fuji. I preferred the images on the back of Sony as well, as opposed to Fuji, as did the model. And it just seemed to react a lot quicker to how I was shooting. And we weren't even shooting fast scenes, just portraits.
Yeah, exactly. We're just shooting portraits. And I mean, we're not saying that the Fuji is slow. It's just that, relatively speaking, the Sony is just a lot faster. So on that basis, yes, there's a big difference in terms of price. But if you trade out the Batis 85 for the Sony FE 85mm f1.8, which is pretty much identical in terms of performance, the price points are very similar. On that basis, I would highly recommend you buy the Sony. I mean, I just think it's a better system overall. What do you think?
I agree to a point, but I would still recommend Fuji.
Really?
Yeah, because to me, it's the character of the camera and how it feels when I'm shooting with it. So even taking into account that Sony did perform better, I would still recommend Fuji.
Wait. The Sony, you agree, is a better camera, but you still recommend Fuji?
Yes, and it's completely subjective, and it's just more about the feeling and how I hold the camera, and you know, it just works a lot better with types of photography that I do. Interesting.
So, I guess there's no clear winner then on this one. You clearly prefer the Fuji?
Yes, yeah.
Wow.
I know it's completely illogical, but it's purely an emotional opinion.
Fair enough. I guess you're right. I mean, it is subjective, you know, because there's no way to kind of tell which system is going to be the best one for you until you actually try it and use it. So now that you've tried both, yeah, I guess you still prefer the Fuji.
Yeah.
Surprising to me. But yeah, I guess on that basis, I would say that if between the two, if you are trying to figure out which system to use, then the only way to understand that is if you actually try it. And the best way to try a system is by renting it, and fortunately Hire a Camera has been kind enough to support this video, so please do check out the website. They've got tons of different camera systems available on their website. They've got both the Fuji, the Sony, and lots of different things available. So anytime you're planning on buying a system or you just want to know about it, the only way you're going to know about it is if you actually rent it and test it for yourself. So please do check out the website, show them a little bit of love. I'll leave a link below. But yeah, other than that, I guess split decision.
Yeah.
Anyway, just want to say thank you so much for watching our video. If you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe, share this video, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Thank you.